Sir, fun fact, but it has to be what you saw in the stairwell.
Yeah.
It's like a free for all.
No, it was, yeah.
Sir, who was he?
Were there any pre-conjugal activities going on?
All right, here you go.
Oh, I can start.
Yeah, you can start.
So basically, New York State officials allowed and wrote a voluntary prayer for students at the beginning of the school day to recite. Basically, you know, it was optional. They didn't have to do it, and that's kind of their argument is what will be going on. So it's up to debate whether organized voluntary prayer by the New York State. New York State officials violate the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, or it was kind of like, or if it was supported by the Free Exercise Clause, kind of. But that's kind of like those two clashing heads. So some parents objected to this, you know, led by Mr. Stephen himself, and sued basically the head of the school district, or the administrator of the school board head, Mr. Vitale. So the civil liberty. Oh, what do you need?
Never mind, I got it.
The civil liberty at stake is basically the freedom of religion and the establishment clause. So basically, what we already went over, but the establishment clause, like the New York officials can't. It was basically came down to that they were encouraging something that they weren't allowed to. It's not even the fact that it was optional. You can't encourage something for the entire school. That's just not allowed. Kind of civil liberty that relates to this, but not is actually, it's the free exercise clause. So like free exercise clause it's at stake because it's the prayer itself is like kind of like goes in with the free exercise. Like they have the right to, in their argument, they have the right to free exercise, their voluntary prayers and then it's, you can do what you want, it's a religion. That's kind of their argument. Next slide, sir. So the decision, the judges favored Engel and the parents 6-1. 2 judges didn't vote. Yeah, kind of more of a landslide. They came to this decision by stating New York basically says, as I said earlier, organized voluntary prayer, because since it was set up by the state officials, violated the Establishment Clause. And then the minority opinion, it was basically that if you took this away, it was a violation of the Free Exercise Clause. So that was the argument that, it's voluntary. By not allowing them to do this is a violation of their freedom.
So what's interesting about that is what are they using as kind of the opposite argument? But they're taking how many what 2 clauses are part of freedom of religion? Somebody besides Jake. A free establishment and free exercise. And so what are they attempting to do in the minority opinion? They're attempting to take that they're attempting to take that free exercise clause and say that, if you're to rule the other way on this, then you're breaking the free exercise clause. When the argument that 6 of the justices agreed with was that it really breached the establishment clause. Go ahead.
Oh, and basically the judge was like telling all the other judges, the minority judge, I forget exactly his name, but he was saying that the other judges were misapplying and misinterpreting the establishment clause. It wasn't meant for that, basically.
Okay, good.
And these pictures, this is just the classic, this is the picture you see like when you're talking about this case, and this is basically what the media kind of went with. And this is just kind of like a funny little thing. We've got to get God back in school and a bunch of people, more prayer and all this. And then God kind of like, why I didn't smoke.
Okay.
It's a little comedic.
That's pretty good, Jake.
Thank you.
All right. Besides Eric, who in this class it was, and you sent this to me, yes, Will? Okay.
Rad. It's so rad. So we can it would be better colors.
What is the canon?
colors are unnecessary.
I like colors.
Colors are boring.
I don't really like reading, so I like to see some.
Colors, too much of nothing.
Dude, I don't like reading, so I like to see pretty colors. I don't have-
Okay, so, we've got Will Kinnon. This one is a required one for this class, but I'm gonna tell you that it's not one of the AP, it's not gonna be on the AP exam. So you're gonna have to know it for your test because I think it teaches, it talks up freedom of expression, real well. And, but you do not have to know it for the AP exam. So maybe make a note of that, asterisk by it, whatever you feel is right.
Well, what about the one that Jake did? Did you have-
That one you do have to know. And unless I say otherwise, you've got to know it for both. And I'm saying otherwise on this one.
All right, so we got a fun one today. It's Morris versus Frederick, kind of somewhat recent, 2007 was when the decision was made, and get to the background in a second.
Okay? You can tell me to flip the slide. That's okay.
So, background. That one picture provides a lot of background. In the 2002 Winter Olympics,
Yes.
Salt Lake City, Utah, and the torch-bearing ceremony passed right through Juneau, Alaska. And so Deborah Morris, who was the principal at the Juneau Douglas High School, she let her students leave classes and go and watch this. And then Joseph Frederick and his buddies thought it'd be cool to hold up a sign that said "Bong hits for Jesus," which I mean everyone knows what that's talking about, legal drug known as marijuana. And Morse told him to stop. All of his friends did, but Frederick kept going. He kept holding up the sign. Morse ended up destroying it and suspending him for 10 days. And then Frederick sued under the 42 United States Supreme Court decision of 1983, which I forget what that did, but it was a free speech, it boosted that importance of it. And when he took it to the court at first, it ruled in favor of Morse. And so, nothing happened. Then he appealed it and then went straight to the Supreme Court. And that sign was 14 feet long, so it was a very big sign.
And it's actually in the Smithsonian, I believe, or one of the museums up there.
That's awesome. That's so funny.
And so the civil liberty at stake here is obviously Frederick claimed that through the suspension, the school was violating his First Amendment civil liberty of freedom of speech. And that's a sign that people made in support of him. It's not making fun, but mimicking the sign that Frederick made. And then the verdict, the courts again favored Morris, but it was a little bit closer this time. All the judges voted. It was 5-4, and actually Ruth Bader Ginsburg voted against it. So she wanted him to not get in trouble for that. And,
Did she do the minority opinion on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that right there is Morse with a bunch of microphones in her face.
Who is Morse?
That was the principal.
Oh, the principal at the school. Okay.
Yeah. And so the basis that this was, based on was that it went against the school's anti-drug measures. And it was the school's decision to decide to be against, illegal drugs. And through holding that sign up, it undermined the school's message and free speech couldn't be applied there. And they decided on June 27th, 2007. And the minority opinion was that, through his suspension, he didn't have free speech and they were violating that. Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus. Fun case.
Fun case. So, the key here, verbiage here is promoted illegal drug use. So it didn't matter if they were saying something they thought was important. It would be interesting to see if they ruled on a case like this today, whether they'd still the rule the same way. Well, so good point. So why is this case different than anything that could happen here? Yeah.
Private school, they don't care.
Private school, you guys are squashed, right? So it doesn't matter. Your rights are very, very few outside of debatably me hitting you, and then I might lose my
They would probably just expel everyone. They'd be done with it. They
Right.
wouldn't
The leverage that you have wielding your rights here are much, much, much less than they do in public school. Now, that doesn't mean that the rights of kids in public school are the same as human rights outside of school. There are some exceptions, especially when it comes to things like search and seizure, right? And we'll get into that a little bit further. Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Questions about that case? Good. So then the next one is Eric Berger, who we are going to ask that he starts his video up.
It's just one slide. I thought that's what the rubric said, one slide, so.
Farce reveal.
Oh yeah, coach, farce reveal real quick.
I don't do that.
You don't do farce reveals?
Dolan and Aiden aren't even doing a face reveal, so why should I?
Ooh. Oh. 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 Ah. All right.
I held my breath. Okay. All right, let's get with this one. All right there, Eric Berger.
All right. So my case was Wisconsin versus Yoder. And so when haven't the Amish been a part of our society? They do a lot for us. I mean, have you ever had Amish butter or anything like that? So anyways, in this case, in Wisconsin, it was in 1971 was when it was debated. But basically, the Wisconsin state law was that until you turned 16, you had to go to school. Well, the Amish fathers, because of religious beliefs, did not want to send their schools past the 8th grade because they just didn't see it as necessary. And so that they took it to court because they were being sued by the schooling system and by the state for not sending their kids to school. So what happened was the Yoder and then 2 other Amish fathers, I'm not exactly sure their names, but they took it to court. And what happened was the courts ruled in favor of Yoder because it went against the First Amendment, the freedom of religion, on the fact that that extra 2 years of high school would not have even done much of an impact on their kids. There was no opposition. 2 people didn't vote, Powell and Rehnquist. It was 7-0, so there was no minority groups or any any people like going against it. It was pretty cut and dry. But yeah, basically it was just the fact that these people, they didn't want to send their kids to school for that reason, for their Amish religious beliefs. And so the courts had to rule in favor because if they hadn't of, it would have been unconstitutional and gone against their civil liberty of freedom of religion.
Okay. Good. And so questions on this case specifically? No, and there's all sorts of rights.
And this also really only applied for the Amish. It didn't really apply for everybody else, but just because the Amish were a special case in their religious points of views, this kind of only applied for them.
And so the next thing you might bring up are people who are homeschooled, right? Is there anybody homeschooled in this room ever at any point in time? Yeah, Crandall. I was. Thank you, Joyce. Yes. So there are limitations really even on that. If you are homeschooled in Virginia, right? I know that qualifications for this, you've got to be. I don't know if you have to take a test to do the homeschooling, or you get certified to be a homeschool teacher, right? Like your parent. But I know because my mom was a certified teacher, and so I don't think she had to go through any of that. But I personally, I know that I had to take a test at the end of each year.
Is that just to authorize that you actually are?
Well, yeah, to show that I'm keeping up with my grade level and we're not just like, tilling the fields or something like that.
Would they force you to go back to regular school if that happened? But what if you
They could, if your scores were low enough, and I had a couple of homeschool friends who did nothing, right? And their scores ended up getting real low. But there's a clause in the Code of Virginia that says that you can exempt yourself from testing if you file for religious exemption. And that's exactly what they did.
I think that's what Uncle Bill, Mr. Duran does.
And I think, the Durans, they actually do things, homeschooling at home, but that family didn't. And now the kids know nothing, right? Like they've grown up and they don't even have the baseline education. Yeah.
So if like one of the teachers here wanted to do homeschooling, they have to take a test, even though like aren't you?
It's a good question. I know that there are less loopholes for a person like me, right? If I decided I wanted to homeschool baby Brooks, right? There'd be less loopholes for a person like
Would
me.
you have to take that test or no? Because aren't you certified for, you're certified for all teachers?
Right, I'm certified, so my thinking is no. I don't know because I haven't attempted to do the process.
So in Virginia, are you forced to attend school no matter what?
I think you can drop out.
Yeah, when
but
you're
like,
16, you can
you
take
have
it.
to, like, your parents just like don't want to let you go to school.
You have to go to school up until a certain age. I think Max is right, 16.
It's 16 because then you can get a GED.
Is there like a law for that, or why is that like specifically?
Because so here's the thing, and we're gonna get a little bit into this again. This unit is that it's not about your right as a minor, okay, to decide whether you want to go to school or not. It's about whether your parents are doing right by you, right? So
Government's business though, like in terms of, that's an argument.
I mean, there is an argument to that. So I'll give you another case in point. In West Virginia, and okay, really all Appalachia, you guys heard of snake handling? Anybody know what snake handling is? In the context, smartass.
They catch like rattlesnakes and stuff, right?
Huh?
I'll answer your question.
Like
Go ahead.
catching-
They catch
Yeah.
like rattlesnakes and stuff, is that what you're talking about?
No. So you know what Pentecostal is?
Isn't that like a religious perspective, like snake handling?
Yes, it is.
Yes, sir. He definitely just looked that up. He was looking
No,
at it.
I didn't look it up.
No, Kyle, lower your hand. I've learned my lesson at this point.
Hey,
So
Eric, he's recording the
Hey,
thing.
Joseph,
I wasn't gonna make the obvious
Hi,
statement.
so here's what it is. What you know what Pentecostal is?
No.
No?
I don't think it's.
Pentecostal is like really charismatic revival type church stuff. So where they're like speaking in tongues and all that stuff. All right. So in rural parts of the United, or some in Appalachia type area, they take it as far as bringing diamondback rattlesnakes into church with them, and they will sit and they'll be holding this thing and putting it all over themselves and all that. Of this? Of snake handling?
Yes.
Do they think God will protect them? from the
Yeah, we
snakes?
will. Okay, so we can watch a video. So,
I
but
feel like that would be-
so there's a verse in the Bible that says something along the lines of, if they have the Holy Spirit, they shall be able to pick up serpents and it will not harm them. Okay, but people do this. People do this. They'll take the snakes into church. The snake will end up biting somebody, right? And people die, right? In church, because not only do they handle these snakes, after the snake bites them, they won't take any antidote or go to the hospital because they think God will cure them. All right. So while their blood and their arteries are slowly turning to jello.
So
right?
like one guy survives like every 10 years, and then that's why they believe still, or
So, I mean, like snake bites aren't, absolutely fatal, right? It depends probably partly on where you get bit and probably how much poison the snake puts into you and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So if there probably are people who live and then that just encourages them to do it more. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. But the reason I bring that up is that there are children in these churches. And so you might say, hey, let Darwin's theory play out. But in the end, right, how responsible are the children, regardless of how misled they are, to be exposed to that? And when should the government get involved for their protection?
well, like the same situation kind of are the same thing.
I
as-
just like, yeah, I can get where that can come from, but like school in general.
Well, like in the Middle East, the kids are like trained to.
Well, we were talking about just school.
No, but the principle still stands. We're talking about like the well-being of kids and the welfare of children. Like the parents are responsible for the welfare of children. So we can talk about civil liberties, whether you want to go to school if you're 14 years old or not. School is, in theory, good for you, right? So you should go to school. So it's not about that civil liberty. It's about the parents doing what they're supposed to do and making you go to school. That's what it's about. Yeah. And you can extend that like anti-vaxxers, right? That's another one you could take it to as well, which for some reason is still, like that happens.
My entire extended family's anti.
Okay, you just admitted to it.
Yeah. Oh, of course, you have to be vaccinated to go to school, bro, or be in the military.
All right, do we just want to look at snake handlers?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, I also saw this really good video of this guy that was like on the Capitol steps when it got stormed. And he was like interviewing people.
Burger, where'd you go?
Bunker.
I'm here, sir.
Are you?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And this guy like.
Seeing is believing, Burger.
It's like goofy.
Oh, that guy?
It's not true. No, I'm talking about Brandon Buckingham.
Old ass round.
I got me.
All right.
Coach, did you see the interview about the storming of the Capitol? One of the dudes who went in, they interviewed him on one of like I can't remember what thing it was on.
Pastor Bitten.
And just weeks ago, Mac Wolford, a renowned Pentecostal serpent handler, died after suffering a bite from one of the snakes that he used to show his devotion to God. Wolford's death sent shockwaves through the Appalachian congregations committed to carrying on this practice. The faithful continue to handle venomous snakes on a regular basis. Gary Tuckman reports.
This church in the heart of Appalachia is completely quiet just before the service begins, except for the creature inside this locked box. It's a rattlesnake, and it's rattling. It's one of 7 deadly snakes about to be used in a wild ceremony in God's name. This is Pastor Andrew Hamblin. He's a 21-year-old serpent-handling pastor at the Tabernacle Church of God in La Follette, Tennessee. He, his wife, and the rest of this congregation practice Christianity much differently than almost all other Christians, using venomous snakes as part of their service. Why? They point to the New Testament, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verse 18. It's stated in part, "They shall take up serpents." Believers like Pastor Hamblin say when God anoints them, they have an obligation to do this, and that God will protect them. Even if they are bitten, doctors necessary. If it looks dangerous, that's because it is. It's also illegal in the state of Tennessee. But that only strengthens the pastor's conviction. Snake handling in churches is a tradition in decline, but Hamblin wants that to change. It's against the law to have.
Coach Walker, hey, look at that. Nice purple.
No, sir, it don't. Now, if someone was to get bit and die, I know the authorities would come in on us and probably shut us down. But that's why I stress so much to my people to, make sure. But now, if it's their appointed time to die, there's nothing I can do to prevent it.
This is not a con game. These snakes are poisonous. They can't kill, and they do kill. Just a few weeks ago, the pastor of this church in the remote West Virginia town of Matoka was bitten by one of his rattlesnakes during his service. Pastor Mac Wolford initially refused medical care, but as he got seriously ill, he gave his permission to go to a hospital. But it was too late. He died the same day. The pastor's father died the same way 3 decades earlier. Pastor Wolford died 2 days after his 44th birthday. Outsiders were not invited to the funeral. But perhaps it's not surprising that the funeral home tells us snakes were part of the graveside ceremony.
Any given time, it could turn around and bite me. But like I said, the Lord, either he'll let it bite or he won't let it bite. He'll let it hurt or he won't let it hurt. It's all up to God.
Roy Lee Christian Jr. is the assistant pastor at another church in West Virginia, the Church of the Lord Jesus in the town of Jolo. He was at the service where his friend, Pastor Wolford, was fatally bitten. He's shocked and saddened, but his faith remains the same. It says, "They shall take up serpents." That doesn't mean you have to, does it? Is that your interpretation that you must take up serpents?
Well, if you believe the word of God strong enough and you really believe it, and the Lord moves on you, you'll do it.
Back in Tennessee, the 21-year-old pastor says he's been bitten 4 times in 2 years. He says he almost died after the first bite, and says he's prepared to lose his life from a snake bite if God determines that's how he should go.
I realize that, and I've thought about it. I have. I've really thought about it, but that's why it pays to be ready spiritually.
Another verse from the New Testament states that faith quenched the violence of fire. So that's why this test of faith happens at many of these services.
Oh, God.
This is called handling fire. People burning their hands, arms, and other body parts with flames shooting out of bottles.
Are you ever worried that seeing people burn themselves and the snakes will frighten your children?
No, not really.
How come?
The God's in it, they ain't no harm in it.
This woman had been crying during much of the service. The pastor saying she had been going through some emotional difficulties. She then took to the altar, grabbing a rattlesnake and shaking it with abandon, almost daring the serpent to sink its teeth into her skin. To us, it looked like she had no idea about the personal risk. Pastor Hamlin, though, claims God had anointed her to handle this deadly serpent.
I'll stand before Christ Jesus, and I'll be judged according to my works on this earth.
The people we talked to at this church know what happened to Pastor Walford in West Virginia. But that risk won't stop them from coming back to this church, looking for salvation in ways both unusual and illegal. Gary Tuckman, CNN, La Follette, Tennessee.
This is 2012. Can we get an update on this guy? He's still alive?
He would sound like.
The,
I am ready to die.
yeah. So, I mean, you guys saw kids there. I mean, is it, does it matter? I mean, does that sort of thing, do we need to take that sort of action? And again, we're talking freedom versus security here, as we have been with all this stuff.
I think that once the kid is 18, they can decide if they want to die with a snake bite. Before that, I don't think kids should be around the whole circus.
Okay, and who'd better to enforce that than the government, right?
No.
Gotta get the government to get involved.
If you're that stupid, natural selection.
All right, I'll see you guys.
All right, Coach.
All right.
That was shocking.
What would be interesting to see is if all like the adults in it. Coach Martin, what would be interesting to see if the adults in it, if they were brought up in it